Hello everybody, good morning. I am Natalie and I'm the Quality Manager at Melbeck Microbiology, and today I'm going to be talking to you about vegan accredited microbiology testing for cosmetics and personal care products. So, vegan cosmetics are the fastest growing vegan market, and they are also the fastest growing area within cosmetics and personal care products. To give you some facts, in 2020, 82% of all new vegan items that were launched came under the beauty category. And it's been predicted by 2027, the global vegan cosmetics industry is going to be valued at $21.4 billion. In addition to that, in a Vegan Society study that was published in 2021, it was found that 97% of British shoppers wanted more vegan products, including things like cosmetics and toiletries. So you can imagine cosmetics is pretty big business for the vegan market. Now, with any companies that choose to create cosmetic products, it is mandatory to cover testing. And within regulations in the industry, all cosmetics and personal care products that are to be sold need to comply with EU or GB regulations, depending on where those products are going to be marketed. And part of these regulations state that mandatory microbiology testing must be performed to ensure both the safety and efficacy of products before they are released onto market. Now, the testing involves 3 different elements, and I'll cover each of these in a little bit more detail so you can understand what's involved in the testing. The first of which is preservative efficacy testing. Now, PET testing is also known as challenge testing, and that's because it's designed to challenge how effective the preservative is within that product. So for cosmetic products, the addition of preservatives is necessary in order to maintain the microbial safety throughout its shelf life and the quality of that product. And by doing so, we need to be able to test that preservative to ensure that it's working. And we do that by artificially contaminating the product with up to 3 different kinds of bacteria and 2 different kinds of fungi over a period of time, which is usually up to 28 days. And we'll take samples at certain time points and compare the data from the results achieved. And by doing that, we will check against predefined microbial limits from testing standards to basically ensure that that preservative complies with those standards. The second type of testing that we do is stability testing. So this test ensures that for new or modified products, they'll meet the intended physical, chemical, and microbial quality, as well as things like functionality and aesthetics of the products. Now, there's no real mandatory stability tests, there's no defined tests, but certain things need to be checked. One of those is the actual aesthetics of the product, so changes in things like colour, fragrances, pH, viscosity, and stuff like that. And that's more of an end user thing. So in 6 months' time after that product has been opened, is it going to still be the same as the day it was opened? Obviously, if it's not, then that's a potential problem because consumers might stop using that product if they think that it's no longer worth using and it's suitable for use. So stability testing involves checking to make sure that those products are going to survive the shelf life that we're putting on them products. And last but not least, we have quality control testing, and this test determines the level of organisms that are actually within that product already. So it's good manufacturing practice to test every batch of product to ensure that it's safe for use. Now, products don't have to be completely sterile, and that's not part of it, but they need to not contain any harmful levels of organisms, and the organism levels can't be too high. And again, we will test samples over periods of time to make sure that the products are free from harmful levels of organisms. Now, many supermarkets and large retailers that are selling these products actually want these tests doing under UCAS accreditations. And at Melbeck, we are a UCAS accredited testing laboratory. And we are accredited to ISO 17025, which is a accreditation that's for testing and calibration laboratories, and this means that we can ensure the tests are done to a high standard and they're done under a certain quality level. In addition to this, we're also accredited for certain individual tests as well, and as part of our range of accreditations that we do have accreditations for preservative efficacy testing and QC testing for both bacteria and fungi, and the accreditation standards are listed there. So a large part of performing these tests is the use of culture media. And culture media is defined as a substance that's used to create the nutritional conditions similar to a natural environment that microorganisms survive and grow in. And the culture media, that we use is things like agar plates that we use to actually grow the organisms. We use things like broths, and we also use neutralizers that involve stopping the preservative from working at certain points that are used as part of the tests to make sure we can then actually isolate any bacteria or fungi that's within those products when we're doing the testing. I'm going to go through a little bit of a history and development of culture media, because even though we use it today, today's culture media was actually created back in sort of like the late 19th century when microbiology really began to become a science. So in 1881, a guy called Robert Koch, who was a German scientist, actually, he's known as the father of culture media, and he was the first person to create solid culture media that we still use today. And he basically experimented with different culture media components, including things like animal serums, meat extracts, and even coagulated egg. And a few years later, a guy called Frederick Loeffler also then expanded on that media that he'd created and added things like peptones and salts into Koch's basic culture media. And today's culture media that we use, whilst it's been refined, pretty much represents the similar recipes that was created all the way back in the 19th century. And at this time, it wasn't fully understood exactly what mechanisms were kind of working and the way in which the media was actually contributing to bacteria or fungi being able to grow. But it was one of those things that was a bit like trial and error, and they just kind of tested lots of different formulations, and what worked they stuck with, and what didn't work they tried to adapt. Now, moving ahead to just after the war, the Public Health Laboratory Service was formed, and this is now known as the UK Health Security Agency. And they were part of the NHS when the NHS was formed, and at this time, they created lots of labs all across the country, and it meant that there was sort of an almost instant demand for culture media being widely available throughout the UK, because they needed to be able to do tests on organisms that might cause disease for humans, and they were protecting the population in the UK to make sure that any potential disease outbreaks and things like that that were causes of concern could be researched. And at this time, this kind of drove innovation and meant that companies were trying to develop a way of making culture media sort of for the masses. And at this time, dehydrated culture media was then formed, and that's what we use today, and that's how it's sold. So rather than it being sold as like pre-poured plates or broths that are already in bottles, it's actually sold as dehydrated powder, which is easier to ship and it lasts a lot longer as well. And it means that throughout the labs in the country and throughout the world now, it's a lot easier and more accessible to actually use culture media, and this was part of the drive of what we see today. Now, from there, the general culture media that we use probably hasn't changed that much, but we've seen a lot of additions in specific and things like chromogenic culture media that we can use. So rather than it being for general use, we now see a lot of culture media being developed that's specific for certain organisms, and it can actually isolate certain organisms so that it's easier to identify them, and it's a little bit more rapid, and we can kind of eliminate certain elements. And that's really useful for things like cosmetic testing, when we want to look at things that are potential pathogens and they could be harmful to humans, because we can use our selective media to isolate anything that's within those products and basically almost overnight find out if there's anything that is potentially harmful to those products. So, I've got a little bit of a game that I'd like to play with you, if you are willing participants. I'm going to list a few common components that are found in culture media and typical culture media. And I want to know if you can tell me what animal-based sources they might be derived from. So the first one is casein. Does anybody know where casein might come from? Yes. What did you say? Cows? Yes. Slightly more specific than cows. No, not quite. What are cows mostly known for? There we go. So casein comes from milk. So the casein is derived from the Latin, which is caseus, that means cheese. And it is a protein that's found in milk, and it's actually what causes the white colour of milk. And it is an amino acid and a nitrogen source for our organisms to grow. Right, the next one then are peptones. What about peptones? Does anybody know where they come from? Any guesses? Yeah, potentially. So they are. Basically it's a partially digested protein source that promotes rapid growth for organisms, and it comes from meat, basically. So it's meat sourced. And last but not least, I have dextrose. So you might be thinking, dextrose is a sugar. How can this come from an animal source? So it's usually derived from a vegetable source, but does anybody know how an animal source might be involved in dextrose production? Not quite. So dextrose, it's a fine white powder, and what can happen sometimes, not in all cases, but it can actually be used with bone char in the refinement, and bone char is literally the burnt bones of animals, and it's used in that refining process, which means that even though dextrose is normally a vegetable source, it still contains an animal element to it. So yeah. And for vegan products that they have to be tested by law, it's mandatory to do all these testing, and if you want to retail to large supermarkets and things like that, they want it under UCAS accredited testing. It kind of creates a bit of an ethical dilemma that we've got all of this culture media that contains these animal sources, and it means that people have got to make a choice then as to whether they want to actually get their products tested and get them out there, or potentially get them tested non-accredited, which might mean that they're not accepted by every single retailer that they want to sell to. But that's when Melbeck come in. So we have a vegan alternative solution to testing that we've created for our clients. So we've been able to formulate new versions of our culture media that don't contain any animal-derived products, but they actually contain vegan alternatives to our testing. And not only that, but we have worked closely with our UCAS accreditors and done lots of months of validation work to be able to offer these tests as UCAS accredited methods. So that means that using our animal-free derivatives, testing doesn't have to rely upon all of these traditional components that are animal-derived, but actually they are vegan alternative sources of our media. And now, so our commonly derived ingredients from our animals, so things like casein, we can actually use hydrolysates that come from plant proteins. We use peptones that are derived from vegetable sources instead, and we make sure that our dextrose does not use any bone char, and it's from vegetable-only sources, including things like corn and pea. In addition to our UCAS accreditation, we are also registered with the Vegan Society, so all of our media alternatives are registered, and it means that we have that vegan trademark along with our UCAS accreditation. And so the testing doesn't have to be solely used for vegan products either. We can also test using our vegan media on any standard products. So as I said, cosmetics testing is mandatory, and it means that you can still be mindful of using our vegan alternative testing without your products also being vegan. And it might not be possible for your products to be vegan either, but it is still possible to test them using vegan consumables. And to give you an example, we've got a third-party manufacturer who's one of our clients, and they don't actually have control of any of the products that they formulate because they already have pre-formulated recipes for when they create the products, but they're still mindful of wanting to make an impact, and it means that we can test all of their manufactured products using our vegan testing, and that kind of ticks the box for them and makes them feel like they can sort of make a positive impact for their company. So that's something that's really good for our clients and something that we can offer to a lot of people. Thank you for listening. If you would like to find out more or discuss any of your testing requirements, we are on stand 4. And if anybody's got any questions about any of the vegan media, please let me know. We have got a bit of time.
Anyone have any questions? Can I ask, cost-wise, if I were a brand who was interested, is it a similar cost to traditional media, or is there an increased cost?
Yeah, the cost is very similar. I think it's slightly increased only because some of the neutralisers, some of the ingredients that are in there are a little bit more complex than the standard media. But it is very similar in terms of cost.
Anybody?
Hi, so I have a question. Like, in terms of claiming, right? Like, what type of claims do your customer like do, apart like besides like being vegan product, for example? But then if they claim like if they tested with your vegan kind of way, like what extra claims can they actually do in the product?
So for cosmetics, there's not really any extra claims. What it is for cosmetic products, they have to have a safety report, and part of the safety report is the testing that's involved. So it's basically just like for like testing, but using the vegan consumables.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anybody else? Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.